Alright. We're about to break this case open then. If it is indeed our mentor, Christoph Gavin, that's the killer in this case. The very first case, as a matter of fact. Court will now reconvene. Defense Attorney Christoph Gavin, will you please take the stand? Yeah. Our glasses-wearing Bishunin guy. Now then, if you would, Mr. Payne. Yes, Your Honor. Will the witness state his name and occupation? Is this farce necessary, Your Honor? Believe me, far stranger things have gone on in this courtroom. Ain't that the truth? Fine, I'll play along. First, there's one thing we need to have made clear. How did you know about the secret beneath the victim's hat? By secret, I'm guessing he means the fact that Mr. Smith was bald. Forgive my curiosity, but what is it about this fellow's head? Your Honor seems to have an inordinate interest in it. Objection! Oh, that was our boy Phoenix. I wouldn't call it inordinate, Mr. Gavin. Mr. Wright! What do you think you're doing, Wright? Wow, things sure look different from the other side. You know what I mean, Apollo? Speaking of looking from the other side, let's consider something for a second. The victim wore that hat all night, never once taking it off, except for that one time. That one time being the instant he was hit. Oh! When Mr. Wright returned from reporting the crime, the hat was lying on the floor. Mr. Wright picked it up and placed it on the victim's head. In other words, in order to have seen Mr. Smith's bald head, you would have had to have been at the scene of the crime, at the time of the crime. In other words, you'd have to be the real killer, is what you're trying to say. Not bad, Apollo. Mr. Gavin, I'm afraid I haven't been entirely honest with the court. What? Oh, I assure you, I had the noblest of intentions. I did it all to protect my client, Mr. Wright. What do you mean? Yet, I'm afraid in the current situation, I see little reason to hide anything. Very well, allow me to tell you the truth of what happened that night. Finally, you may begin your testimony. Tell us, how were you involved in the events of that fateful night? The rage I sensed in that man that night troubled me, so I returned to the club. I went down to the basement and peeked in through the little window to the hideout. It must have been right after the murder took place. The victim was dead, as he appears in the photo. A bald head, an unconscious girl, and Wright holding the bottle in his hand. I sensed that was not the best place for me to be at the time, so I left. That's when the call came from Wright. So, you witnessed the murder? For better or worse, I missed the actual moment of the deed. Mr. Gavin, may I remind you that you're on Mr. Wright's defense team? Your testimony's clearly disadvantageous to your client. What else could I say? I'm standing on the witness stand, after all. So you are, Mr. Gavin. And you had to testify as you just did. You had to tell them you saw the scene of the crime through that little window. Mr. Wright? You had to say that. Because that was the only probable window of opportunity, right, Apollo? Oh. What are you getting at, Phoenix? He's doing this on purpose. I know he is. Mr. Wright, the defense should do the cross-examination, not the defendant. Mr. Justice, are you prepared? Yes, Your Honor. I can't believe I'm going up against Mr. Gavin. This trial is getting weirder and weirder. The rage I sensed in that man that night troubled me. That man? You mean Mr. Smith? He was different from the other customers. His aura, shall we say. I knew he was a serious poker player, but it was more than that. So that you knew the true nature of your client's job? Of course. But I also knew he wasn't engaged in gambling, which would be illegal. Well, it makes sense he'd know. They were friends, after all. Worried for my friend, I returned to the club. You see, I feared this Mr. Smith might be someone coming to settle an old score. I see. What happened then? The basement peeked in through the little window to the hideout. You mean the one used to keep watch up the stairs? Oh, yeah. Yes, a relic of the ancient past. The black marketers used it, I believe. Why'd you go through the trouble of peeking in through the window? Wouldn't it have been easier to just open the door and go in the room? Not if he just wanted to peek in, like, if he didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to upset Wright, you see. Upset Mr. Wright? Yes, what if my fears have been unfounded? I'd be walking in on their match. Bad form, to say the least. So far, everything he's saying makes sense. It must have been right after the murder took place. How do you know it was right after the murder? Really, no need to shout, Justice. I was just getting to that part in my testimony. Ah, there he is, the coolest defense in the West we know and love. Even when you're standing up there on the witness stand, some things never change. I was afraid you'd change too, Wright, but you haven't. You and that overbearing personality of yours. With friends like these, who needs enemies? The victim was dead as he appears in the photo. By photo, you mean the second photograph of the crime scene. Precisely. You see, he wasn't wearing his hat then. I saw his head when he was dead. And then Mr. Wright came along and replaced the hat. Can you describe the scene of the crime for us? A bald head, an unconscious girl, and Wright holding the bottle in his hand. Those were the only three at the scene of the crime. Yes, as far as I saw at least. Then we're back where we started. The killer was the defendant, Phoenix Wright. Who else could it have been? But why didn't you talk to the police? And 2 reasons. First, I didn't actually witness the very moment of the crime. Second, my office was asked to defend Wright. Even after seeing what I had seen, I couldn't abandon my friend. There must have been someone else there at the moment of the crime. Justice, I just said I saw no one, not a soul. But that goes against what Mr. Wright said. Ah, yes. This mysterious fourth person. Who would conveniently be the real killer, I suppose. Glad to see we agree, Mr. Gavin. Let me pose a question, then. Tell me, what possible reason did the real killer have to swap cards in the victim's hand? Perhaps you can show us a reason why such a thing would be necessary. How can I show something I can't find myself? Remember, Apollo, the card that was swapped out was the 5th ace. The one that girl just gave us. The one that had blood on it. Well, Mr. Justice, the question of why the killer would swap out a card has been raised. Can you point out a reason? It's now or never. The defense would like to present evidence to the court. Evidence showing the reason why a card was swapped out. Then go ahead and point out your reason, Mr. Justice. Why'd the killer take the 5th ace? My reason is this. Is that an ace? Why, it's got blood on it. Right next to the spade. What? Getting a little unraveled, Kristoff? This is insane. Why wasn't I told about this? Why? Could this be... Could this be the missing 5th ace? Inconceivable. How could you? What are you doing with that card? Well, that's the thing. Why is Mr. Gavin so upset? It's just a fishy card from some fishy girl. Oh, that card? It's mine. That is, I picked it up at the Borstal Club that night, after the murder occurred. I gave it to my daughter. Cards are her stock in trade, after all. No, impossible, unacceptable! The court cannot accept this evidence. It's a fraud! A fraud? How can you be so sure? What? I would think the only person who could claim it was a fraud would be the one who took the real card from the crime scene. The real killer. Ooh. Wait, does that... Allow me to elaborate. What if this trace of blood was the reason? The reason for the killer to take the card from the scene of the crime? Where are you going with this? Take another look at the photo and at the victim's head. At the moment of the crime, his hat fell to the floor, and a trickle of blood ran from his forehead down the back of his head. Couldn't a drop of that blood have fallen on one of the cards? I suppose. The killer then took the card to hide the blood. Regardless, that evidence is non-permissible. Oh? Right, regardless of how you wasted the last 7 years, you used to be a lawyer. You know what a serious crime it is to conceal evidence. Oh, we can discuss the finer points of our legal system later. What's important now is that I've answered your question. What are you talking about? You wanted to know why the killer would have taken a card from the crime scene. And now, I've told you. That one drop of blood would have been decisive evidence, you see. This is baseless conjecture! Baseless! Then why are you so rattled by this? Ooh. Oh, I assure you, it's quite base! There's our Phoenix. What? It's amazing, really. How a single drop of blood on a single card could lead us to the truth. It's quite simple. Well, Apollo? Yes? Try picturing the scene of the crime in your head. Okay. The murder took place in the hideout. The body of the luckless victim was found at the poker table. And before the killer swapped a card out, there was a single card with a drop of blood on it, the victim's hand. Given this, there is one decisive problem with the scene. Well, what is it? Let's keep it simple, shall we? Given there was a drop of blood on a card, whose position in this diagram doesn't fit? The victims, the killers, the witnesses, the second witnesses? Whose position doesn't fit with the bloody card? Okay, so this is Smith. This is supposed to be right. Olga, and then I guess Gavin over here. That would have to be the victim though, because the blood was trickling off the back of his head, which would mean the blood would have had to have fell back here, not onto the table where the cards were. Isn't it the victim's position that's the problem? I don't follow your logic here, Mr. Justice. Well, look. The victim was struck on the head, sending him back in his chair. You'd think any blood would fall behind the body, not on the table in front of him. Ah! Take a look at the photo again. If he bled in this position, the blood would fall on the floor, not on the cards. Right. Well, that's right. So what does this mean? Incidentally, we were sitting in swivel chairs. So he was turned around. He was facing the other way when he was hit. Apollo, try turning the chair around. Like that. The chair was facing the other way. It would have to be. So we have to assume that at the scene of the murder, the victim's chair was facing away from the table. When Mr. Wright returned from informing the police, which way was the chair facing? When I came back to the room, the body was facing as seen in this photo. Then did the killer turn him back around again? That would mean the killer turned the chair back around. Yeah. Let's take the next step. Look at the diagram once more. We know now the victim was facing away from the table at the time of the murder. But this creates another significant contradiction. Again? Let's test your reasoning skills again, shall we? Apollo, whose location on this diagram contradicts our new understanding of the crime? Is it... Then that would mean Phoenix. If he's the one who hit him. The victim was struck from the front, correct? Indeed. Well, wouldn't it be hard for the killer to hit him from the front? Sitting where his indicator currently is. I think it would be quite hard, yes. Yes, but what you're saying makes no sense! Why would the victim suddenly turn to face the wall in the middle of a game? I believe a sufficient reason will soon come to light. What? There's something in this diagram that makes far less sense, actually. Look again at the diagram. Apollo, if the victim was struck where he was sitting as shown here, where would his assailant be standing? Try marking on the diagram. But there's no room to put a mark where the killer should be. It would have to be right in front of him. Don't worry, let's think it through and see what we find. We know the victim was facing toward the wall at the time of the crime. That's the only thing we know for sure. Try to forget about everything else. Where would the killer have to be standing to strike our victim from the front? Well, right here, where the bookcase is, obviously. The killer had to be standing, well, here. You get points for flair, but that's about all you get. Ugh, I thought I was onto something here, too. No? I hardly need to point out that standing here would be impossible. The victim is facing a solid cupboard. Or are you claiming the killer climbed the cupboard and hit him from above? Ha! It's simple logic, really. If this was the only place the killer could have been standing, then that means that at the very moment of the crime... Wait, I know! At the moment of the crime, the cupboard wasn't there. What? What's this now? I mean, that's the only explanation, right, Mr. Gavin? Your Honor, I have a suggestion for the defense. We should arrange to examine the cupboard in the hideout immediately. Bailiff, send a team to the crime scene immediately. Have them try to move the cupboard. Oh, Your Honor? What? There's one more thing your men should look for. Please give this to the bailiff. What is it? Yes, I see. You do belong in the courtroom after all, Mr. Wright. I do my best. What was that? But let's forge ahead here while we wait. Look at the diagram once again. It's been changed. If the killer was standing here at the time of the crime, then this cupboard wasn't here, which means... Apollo, try moving the cupboard. It could have been slid along the floor. Thank you. As you can see, the cupboard was the problem. At the time of the murder, it has to have been as shown here. Now everything's in place to reconstruct the moment of the crime. Oh my! What's this? What is it now? Look at the diagram of the crime scene once more. It appears we found yet another contradiction. I think I see it too. What I believe to be the final contradiction, in fact. Huh? Oh, dang! Notice something, Apollo? Our line of deduction is rapidly approaching its logical conclusion. Now then, Mr. Justice, please point to the new contradicting indicator. Is it the victim, the killer, the witness, the second witness? Which indicator in this diagram contradicts what we know about the crime? It's apparently what Gavin couldn't have seen through the window, then, if the cupboard was moved. About this cupboard. Are we all okay with assuming it was moved? Sure, why not? Well, if it was, something really doesn't fit. The cupboard would completely cover up the window to the stairs. Oh! That's right. Someone standing outside wouldn't be able to see in. Someone like Mr. Gavin. What did you say? Oh, is the coolest defense in the West losing his cool? Yeah. Don't expect me to play along with your little game, right? It's only a game until someone gets killed, Mr. Gavin. And someone was, while the window to that room was blocked by a cupboard. So, Mr. Gavin, perhaps you'd like to explain to the court. exactly where did you witness the crime scene from? Excuse me, Your Honor. Order! This is a court of law, and I will have order. Well, we just now received word from our investigative team at the Borshmo Club. They've examined the cupboard in the hideout, Your Honor. Oh? And what'd they find? Well, Your Honor, it turns out there's a secret passage behind it. What? There we go. Yes, I believe I mentioned something of the sort before. This is one of the tricks to the room many of our regulars know about. I do remember him saying something about that now that he mentions it. A secret passage is a handy thing to have when you're engaged in illegal goings-on. Never know when you might need to duck away from the eyes of the law. So the room has a secret passage. Where's it go? The other side connects to the restaurant above. The underworld bosses could get away from the cops. And enjoy a cold bowl of borscht, no doubt. Just like our killer. You see where our line of simple deductive reasoning has led us, Apollo? I see it, but I don't believe it. That girl wasn't kidding when she said I needed this trump card for the last hand. At the time of the murder, the window was blocked, and the victim's hat was only off his head for a few minutes between Mr. Smith's murder and Mr. Wright's return from calling the cops. In other words, the only place anyone could have seen the victim's bald head was from inside the hideout. Well, Mr. Gavin? Come on, say something. Dare I ask what really happened that night? Actually, I think we can probably figure it out ourselves at this point. That night, for whatever reason, our killer had a date with Mr. Smith, a date with destiny. There he crouched, hidden in the secret passageway behind the cupboard, holding his breath, waiting for just the right moment. Then the chance came, and he took it. Why'd you do that? Wait here, I'll get help. Miss Olga Orley was out cold, struck by Mr. Smith. But his time was soon to come. Mr. Wright went upstairs to call the cops, leaving Mr. Shoddy Smith alone in the hideout with the unconscious dealer. Then our killer stepped out from the secret passage and into the hideout. The victim must have heard the cupboard sliding aside. He wheeled his chair around to look, and after the deed was done, the criminal must have seen the blood on the card. He would have, of course, realized the need to destroy that evidence. That single spot of blood told the whole story of the crime. Too bad for him he didn't linger any longer in the hideout that night. If he had, he might have noticed the cards on the floor. And the fact that they were all red. Ugh. That was why he flubbed earlier and said they were blue. Well, it seems this trial has taken yet another turn. I'm truly sorry I had to see this day come, Mr. Gavin. Mr. Gavin? Mr. Payne. Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution will continue its investigation. As for Mr. Phoenix Wright, the defendant, he is hereby cleared of all suspicion. Ugh! Believe me when I say I don't believe this is happening, Mr. Gavin. But I'm afraid circumstances call for me to issue a warrant for your arrest immediately.
Objection!
Oh, no need to apologize. I rather enjoyed myself. But we still don't know why he killed him, though. It's not every day you get to witness a legendary attorney's dirty tactics firsthand. Your point, Mr. Gavin? Frankly, Your Honor, I'm shocked that a person of your caliber would be taken in by such a low-grade parlor trick. Excuse me? The defendant is cleared of all suspicion? This is hardly the time for jokes, Your Honor. Mr. Wright hasn't proven anyone's guilt or innocence here. What he has done is use illegal evidence to put the blame on someone else. And not just anyone else, but me, his own defense attorney. Illegal evidence? Let me ask you, Mr. Gavin. Is there still any reason at present to suspect me of wrongdoing? Of course. This bottle, for instance. The bottle Mr. Wright was drinking. How do you intend to explain away the fingerprints on the murder weapon? And not just any fingerprints, am I right, Mr. Payne? Yeah, yes, the fingerprints on the bottle were upside down. I seem to recall this being an issue earlier. The court and this case demand an explanation. I can think of only one reason why one would hold a bottle upside down. And that is to hit someone with the bottom of the bottle. Well, Your Honor? See how the caught fish squirms to the last. Well, Apollo? Yes? Your boss seems awfully concerned about this bottle still. But I'm sure you can come up with a suitable explanation just like that. Yeah. Just like what? Why would anyone grab a bottle upside down other than to... Don't let him trick you into thinking his explanation is the only legitimate one. Is there really another? Take another look at the court record. I believe you'll find a simple answer there in plain sight. How about you just say the answer in plain words? It would be hasty to deliver a verdict with unanswered questions, indeed. Well, Mr. Justice? Mr. Gavin said the court in this case demand an explanation. And don't worry, justice won't leave until justice is done. Perhaps the defense would care to enlighten the court. What evidence do you have to explain why the fingerprints on the bottle are upside down? I think we saw something. Wait. Let me check. Yeah, in this photo, we can see the bottles. And how would you... If you were to reach down and pick it up... From this position... Yeah, that... It's actually easier to show you than explain, Your Honor. Place that bottle on the floor next to your chair. Excuse me? On the floor? Yes. Now reach down and pick it up. Without getting out of your chair. See? You naturally go to pick up the bottle by its neck. With your fingers upside down. There we go. Look at this photograph taken on the night of the murder. The defendant, Mr. Wright, sat here, playing the piano, bottles of juice on the floor to the side of his piano bench. He would have naturally picked up the bottles upside down several times. Wow, I can't believe it was that simple. Recall our dinner that evening, Kristoff. I was drinking my usual then, too. Basically, you used the bottle on the table to do the deed. But then you must have remembered. So you went and picked up one of the bottles from under the piano. And you switched the bottles. You took one of Mr. Wright's bottles and made it look like the murder weapon. Order! Order! What do you have to say to these charges, Mr. Gavin? Fascinating. So this is the legendary attorney's famed tactic of misdirection. Oh, he's still fighting it, huh? What? You claim that I switched the bottle. Where's your proof? Proof? Well, that's, as I thought, more baseless conjecture. I'm afraid your bottle of proof is quite empty.
Objection!
I wouldn't be so sure about that. Your Honor? When you initiated the investigation of the hideout earlier, do you recall I requested an additional investigation? Oh, yes, I have your memo about that here. Retrieve the bottles from under the piano at the Borscht Club. Oh. And here's one of the bottles in question. What? Are you going to dust that for fingerprints too? I'd be surprised if any were on that but his. Mr. Gavin probably wouldn't make such a novice mistake, true. That bottle won't bear a trace of anything. Say, Apollo. Yes? Why don't you go ahead and examine that bottle? I think... Oh, just humor me. Mr. Wright, I think I know what we're gonna find. That bottle will solve this case once and for all. What? That's some bottle. There it is! There's the card! He said he stuffed that card in the bottle, but... Which means the killer must have switched bottles. The Five of Hearts. Yep. What's this? That card! It can't be! Recall that unpleasant woman's testimony for a moment. Miss Olga Orley. Yes, our little swindling Divochka. That night, I planted the card like I was supposed to. And Wright lost the last hand just like he was supposed to. Then Smith searched him. But the planted card was gone. The trap failed. Wait, this isn't... You're telling me that this is the planted card you disposed of? The one you mentioned in this piece of testimony. I happened to put my hand in my pocket and found a card. Yes, I snuck a peek at it and found it was the Five of Hearts. I had a feeling something might happen, so I disposed of the card before the game. Disposed? Where? There was an empty bottle I had been drinking right beside me. I threw the card inside the bottle. Yeah. The Five of Hearts. This is the card. The bottles are swapped. And the only one who could have done that was the fourth person in the club that night. You, Mr. Kristoff Gavin. Here comes the breakdown. That is all. Is this your idea of revenge, Phoenix Wright? Revenge? Revenge for the events that took away your attorney's badge 7 years ago? What about that? What? My past is like my logic, straight and true. Nothing's changed. All I did was point the finger of justice in the proper direction. Fine. I'm glad we could have this little tete-a-tete, right? This is insane! What about me? Don't I get to prosecute anyone? No. Well, maybe. Maybe Gavin. I believe this time we finally come to the end of our trial. Mr. Payne, do you have a report for us on Christoph Gavin? He's admitted everything. We're processing his arrest now. I see. Still, one has to wonder why he would do such a thing. Yeah, that part hasn't been cleared up yet, has it? He didn't even have a connection to the victim, did he? Or did he? None that we know of. Mr. Wright, have you anything to add? I'm afraid I can't shed any more light on the matter. About this victim, Mr. Shoddy Smith. His occupation was listed as a traveler. An odd profession to be sure, and that's all we know about him. You'll arrange a follow-up investigation, Your Honor. Good. Mr. Wright? I'm pretty sure this is gonna come up in a later case, though. I have no doubt. Like with Dahlia Hawthorne's involvements in the third game. 7 years and you still haven't lost your touch. Christoph Gavin was a man with much significance for me, both as a friend and a lawyer. He was extremely talented, to be sure. I needed two things before I could confront him. The first was a place where no injustice would be tolerated, this courtroom. The second was a man who would tolerate no injustice. In other words, a defense attorney. You, Apollo. Oh. Me. A dark time is coming for our legal system. A twisting of justice brought about by our very own court system. We have to set it right. Mr. Wright. Our work lies ahead of us, and I, for one, am looking forward to it. Well, this seems like a good time to announce a verdict. The court finds the defendant, Mr. Phoenix Wright. Yay! Court is adjourned. All right. April 20th, 4:28 p.m. District Court, Defendant Lobby number 3. Thanks, Apollo. You came through just like I thought you would. I'm pretty sure I didn't do a thing in there. It was you who cornered Mr. the killer. I couldn't have done it by myself. You sensed it too today, didn't you? Your ability. Ability? Yes, a sensitivity I lack. You'll come to understand it soon enough. Wait, I wonder if he means... I have one question for the witness, then. Huh? Wait. Of course it's true. Oh, that. What was that, Mr. Wright? You have to find the answer to that question yourself. The answer, right. Today was full of questions without answers. Most of them about Mr. Gavin. What possible reason would he have to commit murder? Perhaps you'll learn that in the days to come. Huh? Wait, you don't know, do you? This locket is the key. Oh, that reminds me. I met the girl whose picture's in your locket. Yeah. And why did Shoddy Smith have it? Your daughter, right? That's right, she's my daughter. You know, you were right about this locket. I took this off his neck the night he died. But it looks like our dear Russian scam artist saw me. So the truth is, this locket really did belong to him. Wait, but that's perjury! You testified! You said the locket was yours! I said no such thing, actually. I merely said it was a locket with my daughter's picture inside. A subtle distinction, but a distinction nonetheless. And it's the truth. Wait, but then why? Why was the victim wearing a locket with a picture of your daughter inside it? Sometimes the straightest path to the truth isn't the best one. Give it time. You're still just getting started with your career. Speaking of which, I may be out of a job. I work for Gavin Law Offices, after all. I still can't believe I just saw Mr. Gavin get led away in handcuffs. Apollo? Yes? How about coming to work for me? Huh? You mean at the Wright & Company law offices? I mean, there's not a single attorney in my generation that doesn't know it. I can't imagine that to be true, but... Wait, but didn't you... You're not a... Oh, I turned in my badge, yes. I'm not an attorney anymore. That incident 7 years ago. Yeah, what? That legendary trial. And at the middle of it all was one man, Phoenix Wright. The case reached its sad conclusion, and he left law for good. What, are we talking about a case we've seen before? Like the one at the end of the third game? Or a different one? Have you ever thought about coming back to the courts? I'm not qualified to stand in a court of law, I'm afraid. Didn't you notice in today's trial? There was a single piece of forged evidence. Forged evidence? What are you talking about? I'm talking about evidence that shouldn't have existed. A naughty magician's trick. Huh? One piece of evidence struck me as odd, it's true. It just seemed, well, too perfect. I'll bet this was the forged evidence. It was the bloody card that girl, that girl gave us. You mean this, don't you? I got this from your daughter, Mr. Wright? Yes. That card couldn't have been found at the crime scene. Why? Because the killer took it with him when he left. That was implied. It was subtle, but leaving the wrong card in its place. Lucky for us. The court cannot accept this evidence as a fraud. A fraud? How can you be so sure? I would think the only person who would claim it was a fraud would be the one who took the real card from the crime scene. The real killer. My verdict was already handed down 7 years ago. Then you really? Yes, I forged this card. Oh. One look at the crime scene should have told you it wasn't real. But you can't do something like that and call yourself an attorney? Who's calling themselves an attorney, Apollo? So it's true. The rumor's true. 7 years ago. None of that matters much now, does it? Huh? I punched him. Oh, damn. It's your story from here on out, Apollo. Perhaps I can help you turn the next page. My office address. Drop in if you'd like. Mr. Wright. Oh, about your uppercut. Try yelling, "Take that," next time. I find it packs a little more punch. And Apollo, thanks for today. Had a good time. Whoa. With that, Mr. Wright walked out the door. And that's how my first trial ended. A lot of mysteries went unsolved. And at the time, I had no idea they were all related. Every mystery that day, connected by a single thread of logic. I'd find that out soon enough. My name is Apollo Justice, attorney at law, and this is how my story begins. Okay, I think that's going to do it. Again, the very first trial went on for a lot longer than I expected it would, but okay, next time we pick up, we'll start with chapter 2. Have a good night, everyone. I'll see you on the next one.